Hi, it's Randy. This video is presented by TapSuccess.
Your inner being is always there, ready to play with you. And you can't be too clever for your inner being. Your inner being is matching you point for point. In fact, almost all of the cleverness that you think is you is them. But you get credit for it because if a tree falls in a forest and there's no one there to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. If there's not someone to translate the vibration into something, then there's no ability to perceive it. Did you get all that?
Yes.
We're having a really good conversation today.
Well, so I guess what I had here is that can I condition my human suit because my
Why?
source is unlimited? Well, I want my human suit to behave more in the ways that I want that is in alignment with source.
Can't you feel the lackful consciousness from which you're making that statement? Can you get there from there?
Okay, so it's assuming that it's imperfect from the beginning rather than it's already perfect?
Assuming that imperfect is perfect.
Okay.
Assuming that you're never going to get it done, that there's always going to be more. If you're an eternal being, isn't there more? And if there is going to be more, then isn't there less now? And if there's less now, can you get to more? No.
Well, condition yourself to experience happiness more often and to be in the receptive mode more often. So step 4 is happening.
And when you are there, you don't talk to us like that.
You don't. Okay. Huh. Because you're already assuming that you're there.
Because perception is perception.
Perception is reality.
And so what you're talking about is training yourself, intending to lean in the direction of feeling good. But in this conversation here today, we have discussed some, you use the word reasonable, all things are. We don't want to make it sound harder or more difficult or easier because all things are possible. But in this discussion of possibilities, all things are possible to the extent of your expectation. But we must say that without condemnation of your current expectation. Your current expectation has to be all right. So let's really talk about this. This is so leading edge and so where this discussion is ready to go. Are you wanting to have a little bit of this discussion? So what you are bringing to the forefront is that there is always a jumping off place, that there's always a place, there's always a now. There's always a powerful now. And let's call this powerful now my perception of this now. So there's always now and there's always more. So what we're talking about is how to get from here to someplace else without putting so much emphasis on here that we stay here. Did you get that? Too much emphasis on what is won't let you have more. So humans have conjured all this ridiculous stuff about, well, you're greedy if you want more, you're not supposed to have more, let's be reasonable about it, or whatever. And all of that is bogus because you are an infinite being always reaching for more. And when you accept that, when you accept the perfection of your incompletion, now you're rocking and rolling. So rather than call it not enough, let's just call it incomplete. And rather than calling it incomplete, let's just call you eternal. Because if you could be complete, you couldn't be eternal. If you can ever get it done, if you could ever get it done, then you're done. And there's no done. There's always more. And so don't you think it's time to embrace the incompletion that is you? We don't mean embrace it, we mean revel in it. Revel in the moreness that is coming. Revel in the knowing that this is great for right now, and oh, there's this, and then oh, there's this, and then oh, there's this vehicle, yahoo, really like it, 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. Then there's this one, and 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 there will always be another and another and another. And what trips you up is your comparison of your perspective with the perspective of others. It was something in the early part of your conversation where you are a teacher, you are an uplifter, you want to assist others in reveling in life in the way that you do. We want you to understand that all of them have an inner being who wants that too. And you don't have to assume the responsibility that their inner beings have for them. And the best that you can do is by acknowledging the existence of your inner being and doing your best to lean in the direction of that influence so that you set the example of joy that you are talking about. And setting the example of joy means never acknowledging someone who is joyless. Setting the example of joy, setting the example of connection means not pitying the poor or the sick. It means acknowledging it and knowing that in their living of it they have asked for more, and then you just follow your inner being along the path to more of all that good stuff for them.
Only look at what you want and don't resent what made you want what you want.
Well said. And another word that is even more common than resentment is don't justify why you want it by pointing. That's what humans mostly do. They want to justify why they want it by pointing out how unfair or how uncomfortable it is. And when you can let loose of that. So now back to the thing that we were talking about really taking thought beyond. So what we're discussing here is it's important to acknowledge that I am at a starting point. If there is more, and there is, that I am at a starting point. And it's also important to acknowledge that I got here from here, and I got here from here, and I got here from here, and I got here from here. In other words, here I am, and there's been a continuum, and here I am. And everything that led to where I now am was helpful and good, but not too helpful if I spend too much time looking in that direction. But acknowledging that all of that existed before this is just logical on the continuum that is you. Does that make sense?
Appreciate each chapter of the book, but don't have to reread each chapter.
Well said. What we're talking about here is how to acknowledge how I fit into this continuum without doing a disservice to myself in the process. So what humans often do is, in their insecurity, they want to explain how they got here. But when you're tuned into source, you don't feel like doing that. Can you feel the freedom in just being where you are and not feeling like you have to explain how you got there to anybody? Because how you got there is irrelevant. It's where you're going that's relevant. And where you are is a great place to be. And so, Esther was chewing on this in a really strong way, wanting to clean up her vibration. And suddenly it occurred to her, and you're talking about it here too, cleaning up vibration brings to the discussion what needs to be cleaned up. So it's a never-ending cycle. Can't get to the bottom of anything. That's why therapy goes on forever. Just leads to that and leads to that and leads to that. If we could zap you with something, we can't. If we could zap you with something, it's not our job to zap you. If we could zap you with something, it would be a feeling of self-appreciation of right where I stand. Right where I stand. And so there are two ways for us to get you there. Only two ways. You choose. Lobotomy or meditation. Because when you meditate, you quiet your mind. When you quiet your mind, you don't bring all of that with you. You just exist in the vibrational frequency where your inner being dwells. And then you begin again, and 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 you begin again. You begin again, and you begin again, and you begin again, and you begin again, and you begin again. Now, we want to ask you the question. When we say you begin again, 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 is your tendency to think of yourself as loser? I have to keep starting over, really? Or do you feel like that never-ending eternal being, beginning again and beginning again and beginning again? Give yourself the permission to be this never-ending, always reaching, wanting to be joyful being that you are. And while it is not possible to be in a time-space reality where there is absolute continuity between what you once were and where you now are, in other words, you've got calendars and pictures and Facebook that will bring you back. There is tremendous continuity for you to observe the evolution of your physical life experience. But the less time you spend trying to define yourself or explain how you got to where you are, and the more instead that you just stand where you are, eager about where you're going, that's what we mean by getting out ahead of it. Eager about where you're going with no explanation about how you got to where you are. And do you know, this is going to help you. You sort of got that, didn't you? This is what you're going to take home from that. Everything that you've lived is represented in your vortex. Everything that you feel tempted to remember and justify, which holds you apart from the solutions you're looking for. When you were rude, you wanted to be nicer, and nicer's in your vortex. All those things that you said you wanted to be, that absence of it, which is what made you want it, it's all in the vortex. So you don't need to bring all that with you in an active way. It's already active, but it's the flip side of it that's active. Did you hear that? That is so huge. Your vortex is the existence of everything that you felt that you needed to justify. Only there's no justification in it.
Everything you want is in a reservoir. Just take the time to connect to that reservoir.
It's all right there, but not as satisfying as you think you want it to be. This discussion will happen more. In other words, we've opened some doors into some new ways of looking at this. And the position that you all have been in since your willingness to play with us, this is the sort of struggle that you've been living in. You're standing in a physical world, and we're asking you to play like you're non-physical. You're standing in a world of manifestation, and we're asking you to be vibrational. You've practiced seeing and hearing and smelling and tasting and touching, and we're asking you to look less and smell less and feel less, and all that. We're asking you to do less of that and more emotional seeing. So we're asking you to don a different perspective. We're asking you to be less physically oriented and more non-physically oriented, but just for a little while. We're not asking you to be non-physically oriented. You will be when you croak. We're not asking you to be non-physically oriented instead of physically oriented. We're just asking you to be a little more non-physically oriented because it will enhance your physical orientation. We're just asking you to lean in the direction of that, to feel more, and then look, to get tuned into source energy, and then to look into the beauty of your world. We never stop looking at the beauty of your world. We are not withdrawing our attention from your human physical experience, from this leading edge time-space reality. Our undivided attention is upon it, but we are vibrationally different as we look than most humans are. That's really the message that we're wanting to offer you here. And it's what you were asking for. I want to be more non-physical while in my physical world, which many would think is impossible, but it is not only not impossible, it is exactly what you intended. You said, I will be the loving being that I am, expecting wonderful things for me and others, and I'm going to go play with others while we all do that together. You never thought that you would be hateful or mean. You never thought that you would feel stingy. You never thought you would have shortage consciousness. You never thought that you would see the abundance of the world as a finite pie where you're all squabbling over the crumbs of the pie. You always knew from your non-physical perspective the expansive nature of this universe, and you knew if this physical time-space reality could inspire a desire within you, that that desire could manifest right before your eyes and before the eyes of others. That's what you knew. And you intended to have fun in the process of it.